Welcome to the ultimate deep dive into one of anime's most ruthlessly fascinating protagonists. The Saga of Tanya the Evil, Yujo Senki, throws us into an alternate World War-era Europe where magic exists, military strategy reigns supreme, and one tiny blonde soldier is waging a two-front war, one against multiple nations and another against God himself. Whether you're here for a refresher before diving into the movie, or you just want to relive Tanya's calculated chaos, this complete season breakdown has you covered. The series opens with a bang as we meet Second Lieutenant Tanya Degurechaff, commanding the 3rd Platoon of the Imperial Army's 205th Assault Mage Company on the Rhine front against the Francois Republic. Tanya demonstrates her cold ruthlessness immediately by transferring 2 disobedient mages to the rear, a death sentence disguised as discipline, as she fully anticipates enemy shelling will kill them there. When the 403rd Assault Mage Company is completely wiped out by Republican mages, Tanya engages the enemy force solo while ordering her 3 remaining platoon members to rendezvous with reinforcements, and she annihilates the Republican mages after they refuse to surrender. Her fearsome combat prowess earns her the terrifying moniker Devil of the Rhine among enemy troops, while back at Imperial Strategic Headquarters in Berun, Lieutenant Colonel Rerugan expresses deep concern about Tanya being deployed to the Rhine, calling her a monster in the form of a girl. Meanwhile, Corporal Victoria Serebriakov learns that the 2 mages Tanya sent to the rear are dead, exactly as Tanya had coldly calculated, establishing our protagonist as a tactical genius with zero empathy. This episode rewinds the clock to reveal Tanya's shocking origin story. In Tokyo, 2013, a callous salaryman fires an underperforming employee who, in retaliation, pushes him onto train tracks. As time freezes, the salaryman encounters a self-proclaimed god speaking through the voices of bystanders, but he arrogantly denies the being's divinity and dubs it Being X. The salaryman is reborn as Tanya Degurechaff in a poorly funded Berun orphanage, where routine testing reveals her extraordinary magical aptitude. Calculating that military service offers better prospects than orphan life during wartime, young Tanya enlists and excels rapidly, eventually becoming a ruthless training instructor at a military academy whose brutal methods horrify Rerugan. By 1923, 9-year-old Tanya serves as an artillery observer when the Entente Alliance invades the Northern Theater, where Lieutenant Colonel Anson Su of the Entente's 5th Aerial Mage Battalion pursues her. Ordered to delay the enemy, Tanya holds her ground at tremendous personal cost, suffering severe injuries but accomplishing her mission. She's subsequently awarded the Silver Wings Assault Badge and paraded as a war hero, the exact opposite of the quiet rear echelon career she desperately wants. After recovering from her injuries, Tanya finally gets her wish: assignment to the Tactical Instructor Squad away from combat. However, her relief is short-lived when she's ordered to test the experimental Elenium Type 95 computation jewel, a device that proves nearly as deadly as frontline combat due to its catastrophic instability. Chief Development Engineer Adelheid von Schugel pushes Tanya to her absolute limits through dangerous testing, but no amount of adjustment can stabilize the Type 95's volatile magic output. After Tanya criticizes the fundamentally flawed technology and requests a transfer, which is approved, the project appears doomed to cancellation. That night, Being X manifests through an animated Nutcracker doll and berates Tanya for her continued lack of faith and spiritual insight, but Tanya destroys the toy and dismisses the encounter as a nightmare until she wakes to find Deus Vult, God wills it, written on paper by her bedside. During one final test, just as the Type 95 reaches critical failure, Being X performs a miracle and permanently stabilizes the device, proving his power in a way Tanya cannot deny. The catch: the Type 95 now works only for Tanya and amplifies her magical abilities exponentially, but only when she prays to Being X, a condition she views as a curse rather than a blessing. This sets up the events leading to Episode 1, and afterward, Headquarters sends both Tanya and Victoria to officer training in Barun. 6 months later, Tanya is thriving at the Officer Training Academy and encounters General Zetor in the library, who asks her assessment of the war. Demonstrating her strategic genius, Tanya predicts the conflict will escalate into a world war and outlines an innovative strategy leveraging mage units' mobility and firepower to minimize casualties while maximizing tactical effectiveness. Impressed by her military acumen, Zetor requests a formal report, which Tanya sees as a golden opportunity for career advancement and a path away from frontline danger. In a calculated move, Tanya meets her academy rival, Captain Uger, at a cafe and emotionally manipulates him by exploiting his concerns about his family's future and his young daughter potentially being forced into military service, convincing him to drop out in exchange for safer work. Zetor presents Tanya's proposal for a rapid response mage battalion to General Kurt von Rudersdorf, and at a strategic headquarters conference, the plan receives approval for implementation. Tanya is summoned to dinner with her superiors and informed she'll lead a 48-member rapid response battalion with a promotion to captain. But to her absolute horror, this command position will actually be far more dangerous than standard frontline duty. She desperately attempts to delay the battalion's formation, but when newly promoted Victoria is assigned as her assistant and applications flood in, Tanya can no longer avoid her fate. Tanya implements an impossibly difficult screening test, hoping to reduce recruitment, and indeed most applicants fail, resulting in complaints from her superiors about unreasonably high standards. She agrees to accept lower quality candidates but declares she'll bring them all up to acceptable standards within just 1 month, receiving complete freedom in her training methods. What follows is a hellish training regime that nearly kills several recruits, precisely Tanya's intention, as she hopes the brutal conditions will drive them to quit. Instead, the terrified mages conclude that dropping out will result in even worse punishment, and they push themselves harder to meet her impossible expectations. Within the month, Tanya has successfully forged the recruits into elite soldiers even by her exacting standards, creating the 203rd Aerial Mage Battalion, nicknamed Pixie Battalion. Their first deployment comes when the Grand Duchy of Dacia mobilizes forces and invades Imperial territory. But the battle proves laughably one-sided. The Dacians lack mages entirely and employ hopelessly outdated military tactics. The 203rd effortlessly slaughters Dacian forces, while Tanya leads a strike directly to the enemy capital to test her battalion's true combat effectiveness. There, they locate the Republic-backed Carbelius Arms Factory, which is completely undefended against aerial assault. Exploiting international law requiring advance warning before bombardment, Tanya broadcasts her intentions in a childlike voice that factory workers dismiss as a prank, preserving their surprise advantage and allowing the 203rd to completely annihilate the facility before triumphantly returning to base. Imperial Headquarters concludes that Dacia will be fully occupied by winter and shifts strategic focus to their two-front war against both the Entente Alliance and the Francois Republic. The decision is made to prioritize destroying the Entente first, but severe supply shortages threaten the operation. Imperial forces only have enough resources to last through winter. The 203rd receives transfer orders to the Norden Front against the Entente, and during their transit, Tanya and Victoria discuss the troubling possibility that the Entente may have formed alliances with the Republic and the Allied Kingdom, this world's equivalent of the United Kingdom, which later proves accurate. At Norden, the beleaguered Viper Battalion faces overwhelming Entente attacks and heavy casualties until the 203rd arrives just in time, rescuing them and launching a devastating counterattack. When offered reinforcements, Tanya refuses, wanting the 203rd to earn an independent reputation for excellence. She personally pursues enemy bombers while her battalion handles the main assault. Then Being X stops time again and possesses a dead Entente soldier to taunt Tanya about fighting the entire world. Tanya shoots the Avatar and subsequently discovers and destroys a hidden Allied Kingdom observation post, gathering intelligence on her abilities. Meanwhile, in Paris, Lieutenant Colonel Zevran Biento warns General Pierre-Michel Lugo about catastrophic Republican mage losses and advises against further support to the Entente. But Lugo, seemingly influenced by Being X, ignores the recommendation and continues sending reinforcements. At Port Arnelis, Colonel Sue bids an emotional farewell to his family before departing for the supposedly quiet Fjord posting, receiving an early Christmas gift rifle from his daughter Mary. At the Imperial Army Northern Theater Command Strategy Conference, Tanya proposes a tactical retreat to shorten supply lines, allow proper resupply, and position forces for a spring offensive, a sensible plan that would prolong the war but preserve the Army's strength. Despite her sound military logic, Headquarters orders an immediate offensive regardless of potential losses, and Tanya quickly deduces through conversation with Rerigan and Rudersdorf that this attack is actually a diversion for an amphibious assault behind enemy lines. Rudersdorf assigns the 203rd the critical and extremely dangerous mission of launching a surprise attack on the heavily fortified Fjord ahead of the Imperial North Sea Fleet. During the assault, the 203rd encounters fierce resistance from a battalion-sized mage unit commanded by Colonel Sue himself. Tanya's first company devastates Sue's forces, and in a climactic confrontation, she personally bayonets the colonel, who plummets into the sea below. Tanya recovers Sue's rifle and claims it as a trophy of war. In a heartbreaking post-credits scene, Mary Sue and her mother in Arkansas hear a radio broadcast reporting that Fjord's defenders were completely wiped out, leaving young Mary in tears as she realizes her father is gone. Lieutenant Colonel Biento and the Republican Army's 2nd Mage Company support a rebel uprising in Rhine City, former Republican territory now under Imperial occupation in the Western Theater. The rebels' control of Rhine's major railroad creates severe strain on Imperial supply lines, and the 203rd is ordered to suppress all resistance with authorization for civilian casualties if necessary. Upon arrival, they find the city heavily defended, but Strategic Command has devised a ruthless plan to legally circumvent international law. Under the rules of war, if a city fails to evacuate after an official evacuation order, all remaining persons are classified as enemy combatants. After fierce aerial combat, battered Republican mages take shelter in a building. But when they refuse surrender or evacuation demands, the 203rd witnesses Rhine rebels executing a captured Imperial soldier. Imperial artillery unleashes devastating bombardment on Rhine, causing completely driving off Republican mages and returning the city to Imperial control. At strategic headquarters, Zetur reveals to the horrified Rerigan that the legal framework enabling Rhine's destruction actually originated from one of Tanya's own academic theses. Meanwhile, in an Allied Kingdom hospital, the critically wounded Colonel Sue slowly regains consciousness from his near-death encounter with Tanya, declaring that God himself has commanded him to destroy the devil, showing Being X's direct intervention to create a future nemesis for Tanya. Days after Rhine's destruction, Tanya encounters Major Uger, her former academy rival, who briefs her on Operation Revolving Door, an ambitious 4-phase plan involving a strategic Imperial withdrawal from the Rhine to lure Republican forces into a massive trap. General Zetur presents this operation at the Command Strategy Conference and specifically designates the 203rd to attack Republican rear positions during the execution. Phase 1, Operation Fog and Sun, consists of a sophisticated disinformation campaign designed to convince Republican intelligence that Imperial forces are conducting a large-scale retreat due to weakness or resource depletion. Rerigan explains to Tanya that Phase 2, Operation Shock and Awe, targets Republican command headquarters and their entire communication infrastructure for simultaneous destruction. Chief Engineer Schugel introduces a new high-speed rocket weapon, the V-1, which will transport the 203rd to 3 potential Republican headquarters locations for the decapitation strike. Unbeknownst to the advancing Republican Army, retreating Imperial forces have methodically planted extensive booby traps throughout the abandoned positions, explosives that will trigger at the precise moment to maximize enemy casualties and chaos during the operation's later phases, setting the stage for one of the war's most devastating strategic victories. Colonel Sue is revealed to have survived his injuries and is shown traveling aboard an Allied Kingdom vessel. Following the successful execution of Operation Shock and Awe, which destroys Republican command and communications infrastructure, the 203rd begins their extraction via submarine. At the Imperial High Council, government officials aggressively grill military leaders about the withdrawal strategy, accusing them of recklessly exposing Imperial manufacturing facilities to potential Republican attack. But the generals deliberately stall for time, waiting for confirmation from Tanya's unit. When the 203rd's mission success is finally confirmed, General Zedor triumphantly announces the launch of Phase 3, Operation Lockpick. The booby traps left by retreating Imperial forces detonate simultaneously across the Rhine front, causing catastrophic Republican casualties. The 203rd participates in Phase 4, systematic mop-up operations to eliminate surrounded Republican remnants, when they're suddenly ambushed by an Allied Kingdom mage unit equipped with advanced long-range weapons and led by none other than Colonel Anson Sue, who is enhanced by Being X's power, setting up the season's climactic confrontation. Rather than retreating from Sue's surprise attack, Tanya orders the diminished 203rd to go on the offensive, using their altitude advantage to engage the Allied Kingdom mages. Despite their tactical positioning, the 203rd suffers heavy casualties, particularly when Sue deploys a magically enhanced trench gun with devastating effect. Sue pursues Tanya relentlessly for a personal confrontation, and when they finally meet face-to-face in aerial combat, Tanya drives her bayonet into him, but suddenly recognizes him from their previous encounter at Fjord. At that moment, Being X directly possesses Sue's body, and he grabs Tanya with superhuman strength, attempting to kill her in close combat. Victoria intervenes at the critical moment, helping Tanya break free, and Tanya empties an entire magazine directly into Sue at point-blank range, her bullets finally penetrating his magically reinforced defenses. Riddled with bullets and mortally wounded, Sue triggers an explosive device in a final suicide attack, but Tanya and Victoria barely survive the blast by maximizing their defensive magic, just as a full battalion of Imperial reinforcements arrives and drives off the remaining Allied Kingdom mages. Meanwhile, the catastrophic losses from Operation Revolving Door force the Republican Army to abandon Parisy entirely, and Imperial forces march in to occupy the capital. The Imperial High Council congratulates military leadership on their stunning victory, but while the 203rd celebrates on a captured Republican beach, Tanya and Victoria discuss the war's supposed end. Tanya suspects the Republic is planning a maritime evacuation to prepare a counter-offensive and requests permission to attack the Republican military port of Brest to truly end the war, but headquarters denies her request and explicitly prevents her from conducting even reconnaissance. As the Empire celebrates a truce that could potentially lead to armistice and genuine peace, Tanya explains to Rerugan her awareness that the war will inevitably restart. The Republic and all other nations will never permit the Empire to become Europe's dominant superpower. Her prediction proves accurate. The Empire's overwhelming success finally pushes the world's remaining superpowers, the Allied Kingdom, the Russi Federation, and the Unified States, to form a military alliance specifically to contain Imperial expansion. When General Lugo proclaims the establishment of the Free Republic operating from Tunis in North Africa, both Imperial citizens and soldiers realize the war is far from over. As hostilities resume across multiple fronts, Tanya and the 203rd receive deployment orders to Africa to engage the Free Republic's forces. While haranguing her troops before departure, Tanya declares that the war itself proves God's failure and that the power to shape human destiny now rests with mankind, specifically with soldiers like themselves defiantly launching another challenge against Being X's authority. Meanwhile, in the Unified States, Mary Sue, now blessed with Being X's supernatural power and burning with hatred, enlists in the U.S. Army with a single purpose: finding Tanya Degurechaff and avenging her father's death, setting up a future confrontation between two individuals both empowered by and opposing Being X for completely different reasons. In this light-hearted special episode, Tanya and the 203rd are deployed to the Southern Desert Theater fighting the Free Republic and its foreign allies, where harsh conditions and severe resource shortages make daily life miserable. Colonel Rerugen, sympathetic to their plight, ships dried pasta to the troops as a morale boost, but the desert's water scarcity makes it impossible to properly cook. After a successful raid, the 203rd manages to acquire substantial water supplies and finally boils the pasta, only to discover it's virtually tasteless without proper seasoning or sauce. Seizing an opportunity, Tanya requests headquarters approval for a series of force reconnaissance raids under the official designation Operation Desert Pasta against Free Republic and Allied outposts, conveniently omitting the detail that the raid's true purpose is acquiring ingredients for pasta sauce. The operation proves highly successful on both military and culinary fronts. The 203rd deals significant damage to enemy positions while gathering tomatoes, herbs, spices, and other ingredients. The episode concludes with the battalion finally enjoying properly prepared pasta with delicious sauce, accompanied by quality wine liberated from enemy supplies, providing a rare moment of levity and satisfaction for Tanya's perpetually beleaguered soldiers in an otherwise grim and unrelenting war.